Probably 50% of wholesalers that I have really good relationships at least mention to me in their long-term plan that they don't want to be in that forever. Yet I think very few make the leap.
Where I paused and I said, okay, I've always wanted to become a financial advisor. My kids are getting older. I like to be, off the road a bit more. Maybe this is the wake up call that I needed. This is my aha moment. Being that we're a single income family, you get accustomed to a different type of lifestyle with a really high income. The easiest route would have been to go to an employee type of channel firm. I'll be very honest. My recent transition was one, truthfully, that I wish I could have made, north of a decade ago.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I've had some great relationships that I've built over the year with wholesalers. Our businesses intersect quite a bit because we all have such great relationships with financial advisors and we're talking with the same people. And at least quarterly, I have an experienced wholesaler reach out to me just talking about the potential interest to move to the other side and become a financial advisor. And while I've helped a few wholesalers do this over the years, it's definitely easier said than done. Ross Kirwan, a wholesaler for over 17 years, who I know really, really well, was generous enough just to come on today and talk about his experience and his recent transition from wholesaling at PGIM Investments to becoming a financial advisor. I really think this is going to be valuable information for any wholesaler that has interest in making a leap just by learning from Ross's best practices and some of his mistakes, as this move was multiple years in the making. And I really think it's going to help streamline your efforts down the road. Ross, I really appreciate you coming on today.
Absolutely, Corey. Thank you for having me and happy to share my journey to help other folks along the way.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think a lot of people have the ability to have some inside baseball like this, so I really appreciate it. But Ross, before we get started, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about your career in the wholesaling world prior to making the leap?
Sure. So spent about 17 years in full, call it distribution sales roles on the asset management side. 7 years in the non-trade alternative space, helped close the doors of a firm through that 0809 period. And then spent, call it, the remaining decade in the traditional mutual fund ETF world as an external wholesaler. And very much enjoyed it. Did not know the role existed prior to finding it. And I tell folks, I found wholesaling almost like you find, the bottom of a staircase of stairs. I just kind of fell into it. I loved it, and did it for a quite a long period of time, 17 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been awesome. I feel like we kind of started in the industry together in the same territory and kind of got the ability to grow up together in the industry. So been awesome for sure. When did you kind of start to realize that long-term wholesaling maybe wasn't for you and you wanted to make the move to be a financial advisor?
Sure. So, great question. And, I'll be very honest. I just, my recent transition was one, truthfully, that I wish I could have made, north of a decade ago or 15 years ago. It just wasn't possible based on family dynamics. My wife and I were married, but we decided to start a family quite early, and we want to do whatever we can to put ourselves in a good, financial spot and to allow her to stay at home with the kids for those early first few years. And so my path of least resistance was to wholesale, support the family, be able to allow her to stay home with the kids, as well as earn a decent living and kind of help out where we needed from a financial standpoint at home to be one income family. So truth be told, I wish I could have started in the business as a financial advisor. And then as a reminder, going through that 07, 08, 09 period, there weren't a lot of opportunities to jump to the other side of the desk in that challenging point in time. So I really decided to make the transition from wholesaler to financial advisor truly about 5.5 years ago. And it was because my kids were getting older and I also desired to be off the road and, simply put, want to be around for my family more often, but turn around and help other families. I had always been the person in the neighborhood or in the family that got questions around mortgages or 529s or the classic, what do you think the market's going to do? And so I decided I'm going to flip to the other side of the desk, learned a ton from the financial advisors that I called on. But yeah, about 5.5, 6 years ago, and happened to share more of that that journey and why it really ignited that passion, about that 5 to 6 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, prior to me doing this as an independent recruiter for financial advisors, I was kind of a wholesaler for almost a decade, just being a captive recruiter for firms like LPL and Ameriprise. And I loved it. It was one of the best jobs in the world. I just had, so much freedom and I got to travel to all these great places and entertain and help financial advisors. There just came a time where I really wanted to slow down, and there was just the comp changes every single year, and having to do more with less was just, really, really frustrating, and kind of, getting into my family time for just to make it really simple. But I really tried quite a bit to get into the financial advisor world, and I learned really quickly that it's easier said than done. I mean, just through your experience, why do you think that is? I mean, I talk with a lot of wholesalers, probably 50% of wholesalers that I have really good relationships, at least mentioned to me in their long-term plan that they don't want to be in that forever. Yet I think very few make the leap. Why do you think that is?
Well, first, the career of wholesaling, I am bullish on the career and the role. I think you look at all these asset management firms rolling out all these new types of products, and you have to have a sales force to distribute them. Wholesaling may look different, and the structure may be a different setup. But before I, move away from wholesaling, I just want to make folks aware it is a great career. I'm bullish on the career as a whole. So my transition had nothing to do with thinking there was not going to be a role for me in the industry moving forward.
Yeah.
But for me personally, about 5.5 years ago, had a really challenging knee surgery and knee injury. And so I transitioned from one firm to another. And about month number two in, tore my ACL trying to, play soccer with some buddies in the neighborhood. I had hung up my cleats long ago, and they're like, "No, no, no, you can come out. You can play goalkeeper. You're fine." And so we jumped out on the field and tore my ACL. And I was like called an injured athlete that wanted to get back on the field. So I didn't really do the right treatment afterwards, and had two subsequent other knee injuries. And when you try and wholesale on crutches, when you're getting in and out of rental cars, in and out of hotels, you're going to conferences, that was my moment where I paused and I said, okay, I've always wanted to become a financial advisor. My kids are getting older. I like to be, off the road a bit more. Maybe this is the wake up call that I needed. And at one point, I was on crutches on these nice marble floors in one of the office buildings in South Park, and I had a heavy backpack on, and I flipped and I fell on my back. And it was
Oh
at that
man.
moment I was like, okay, this is my aha moment. I want to, start moving down the route of thinking about transitioning from one side of the table to the next. And being that we're a single income family, you get accustomed to a different type of lifestyle with a really high income. So I think a lot of folks that cannot or do not make the change is they try and make it really fast.
Hmm.
So when I realized that 5.5, 6 years ago, I was like, wow, all right, this is going to be a long journey to transition to the other side of the desk, to not really interrupt our, family budget. And so I think that's the biggest thing, Corey, is there's a lot of families that are supported by the wholesaler's income, which is quite high relative to other type of careers or positions. And many times the lifestyle creeps up to have long-term expenses that are dependent on that wholesaler income.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main reason that folks, do not shift from wholesaler to financial advisor, because you have to plan multi-years in advance, and you really do have to sacrifice on the budget and
Yeah.
become quite frugal for years in advance. And happy to talk more about what we did to prepare for that transition.
Yeah. And I mean, we were having these conversations for a couple years before you actually made the leap, just having friends. And I know that you kind of started out in one direction and then kind of went in a different direction. At least from my side, I don't know the conversations that you were having before, but the initial conversations were, hey Corey, if you ever know any financial advisors that are potentially in the last inning of their career and are looking for, a younger, motivated guy to come in, give me a call. And what I thought when I was looking at potentially looking to exit captive recruiting and moving to an advisor role, that would be pretty easy. But it definitely comes with some challenges that I know you could definitely share with the group. Can you talk about some of the opportunities you looked at on a high level and maybe why they didn't come to fruition?
Sure. So the easiest route would have been to go to an employee type of channel firm, get some type of salary or base, and make that transition, have some benefits, and be tied pretty close to the hip to that organization. So that option was on the table, but being that I covered the independent broker dealer channel and a few of the RIAs in town, I'd almost seen too much. So I didn't. If I thought I was going to move to the independent route at some point, and if I thought that RIA or that type of structure was attractive for the future, it was really hard for me to take a step back and go to the employee channel route. And because we had saved for so many years, probably wasn't the best option for me at that point. Now, if someone was moving to a new town and they had no change in their pocket and they needed to support a family, I think those are some great options out there in the employee channel. Wasn't for me. So then where I landed next was I got to buy revenue. I got to buy revenue. I have to replace my paycheck. But I was always very cautious because these advisors that are close to me, they are essentially the ones that I need to be talking to, but I didn't want to interrupt my day job. And because what if something didn't work out? What if I was playing for two teams at one time, my wholesaling firm, as well as talking to advisors? So I was very cautious around having that conversation. But I would say to other wholesalers, be open and share to advisors that you're interested. Because I've had a couple of conversations after I made the move where they said, Ross, I had no idea you were thinking about making a move. Why didn't you let us know? And you're really guarded in some of those conversations because they are your clients, they are your income at that component, and you don't want to be on two teams at once. From a feeling, but kind of the moral side of thing, I felt like I had the wholesaler badge on for that firm, and it was incorrect to kind of flip the other side and have a different conversation. But you can. I think you can be more open. Advisors want to get to know you. You should share what you desire and want to do. And then the last option I came to because I was my current firm and the route I went. The reason I didn't buy revenue is because I came down to two opportunities in the last couple of years. One, I was outbid. So I got to the finish line. There's a great advisor here in town. They were selling their book of business. They wanted, someone to come in and be their succession plan. And I got outbid by a bigger name, a bigger check, and a little bit more continuity. And just was not the route that was for me. But not wasted, but that took about a year's time. And so then I moved on to the next opportunity where it got really close to the finish line to acquire an advisor's book of business. And I'm very thankful for you, Corey, and all the folks that were, active in that conversation to help me get to that finish line. But the valuation came back about 30% higher than we'd anticipated. From the P&L standpoint, it almost looked like a add on the financing cost and paying the advisor, almost a cash losing proposition for a couple of years. And I was okay to, not make a lot for a couple of years, but going into the negative seemed really challenging. So then we started talking about earnouts, and just based on the age of the advisor and the mix of the practice, a 5 or 10 year earnout just didn't seem possible. And so at that point, I had saved a lot and had decided, you know what, I want to do this. I just need to rip off that Band-Aid. And so I started looking at more qualitative factors. Were there teams out there that I could link into, that I could build my own business within a greater architecture, build a book of business versus building a business. And happy to talk now, Corey, if you're interested, what I found when I looked at the independent or buying revenue kind of on the payout ratios and
Yeah.
what some of the things that people should be thinking about and what they should not be thinking about.
Yeah, I was just about to stop you and like talk about that a little bit from a high level. So yeah, just go over what you found from. Are you talking about independent earnouts or like if you bought a practice?
So a little bit of both. I'll start on the independent because along that journey of those options, there were a couple of advisors that said, "Hey, we'll bring you on board. This is maybe what your earnout would be," and so I was able to look at a lot of different P&Ls, a lot of different payouts, and from what I found is everybody is in a pretty tight spread. Let's call it 60 to 85% payout, all in, like real estate, overhead, marketing costs, admin. And so the leanest business I found was at a 85, 86% true payout,
Mm-hmm.
without a lot of admin support, without a physical office space.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I saw that everyone was in a pretty tight spread, I started to think more about qualitative things. Where is the office located? Is it close to home? Are there good people there? Do they have a lot of humility? And then what services can they provide in that payout? And services like help with financial planning or possibly managing the portfolios, or what type of support staff do they have in place? So when I evaluated all these options and reviewed all these P&Ls, even a really high payout, let's call it 85, 90, or 95 percent, you add on real estate, you add on admin, you add on E&O, you add on a few of these things, you quickly come down to something in the 60 to 70% range on a payout.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what I found. So I kind of removed myself from trying to find the best payout, or the best revenue to purchase, and landed on, if I want to be in that range and I want to lean towards the people I like best, where I think I could provide value, and from a geographic standpoint, somewhere close to home.
Sure. Yeah, that's great to hear. And payout is never the most important decision making criteria. And any financial advisor that I ever have a conversation with that winds up making a decision based off of purely payout or purely economics, 90% of the time we're having a conversation with that person in another 3 years. Because once that paycheck is gone, or you're there for a few years and you have a really high payout, but you don't have the tools and resources to be able to serve your clients efficiently or be able to grow your business, we're getting a phone call. So that's great that without much coaching, we're focusing on those things, which is fantastic. I think a lot of wholesalers that I speak to, they talk about potentially exiting and buying either a financial advisor's total practice or buying a minority portion of their practice with the ability to buy that down the road, the rest down the road. And I'm not trying to discourage any wholesaler from doing that, but as you were saying in the beginning of this, there's only so much money to go around in these deals. And a lot of times when I have a wholesaler looking to go into another advisor's organization, let's say it's $1 million trailing 12 revenue practice, 40% of that goes away to expenses right away on average, 30 to 40%. So you're left with maybe $600,000 of expendable income left. And a lot of times, the financial advisor needs to stay on for a couple of years before they move out, or they have a very unclear timeline in terms of when they want to get out of the business. So sometimes a financial advisor, their whole identity is them being a financial advisor and servicing their clients and building their relationships with their clients. And if somebody wants to come on to a financial advisor's organization with the ability to buy it, a lot of times, typically the smaller the practice, there's not as much room left to be able to even pay somebody long term to come into the organization if they're going to stay on as well, which makes things really unclear. I think you ran against that a few times.
Yeah, things got really tight. And my challenge, I found a couple of my opportunities. If I made things really tight over the next 5 to 7 years, I probably would be less focused on growing and more on cultivating the relationship with the existing clients. And seeing some advisors make transitions, the ones that spent a couple of years really going out and building their own book of business, kind of shaking the trees, have a lot different growth rate over the next 5 to 10 years versus someone that purchased a book. Now, I don't want to discourage any wholesaler from buying a book of business, and I think it's much different if you're an existing financial advisor in a business looking to purchase out a senior partner. I think that's a completely different. That wasn't my career journey. That is a career journey for a lot of folks. But I think there's this thought that you can just go in and buy it and run the operation as is. And something a little bit more I found is there's a lot of fun in the grind, and wholesalers are grinders. I mean, day in and day out, they're running 6, 7 meetings a day all over, a 1 or 2 state territory. They live and die by their daily sales run. So
Hmm.
I think personally, kind of inside from a wholesaler perspective, if you're a really good wholesaler, you're going to love building your own book of business. You may think it's easier to buy revenue, and that may be a part of your ultimate plan. But I would say bet on yourself and bet on your own unique abilities you learn as a wholesaler. You learn so much doing this role that you can easily translate that into having that same type of activity but just helping families instead, right? As opposed to getting that next big trade. So uh, things get really tight. You're right, Corey. Back to your question, things get really tight, and so then you say, okay, if I save money and I can go a couple of years without making the same level of income or paycheck. And what we did personally is we didn't take on a lot of long-term expense commitments. I deferred compensation over a 5-year period to basically create my own severance package in the future where I knew I was going to be at a lower tax rate. And basically, that savings pool that I had that I was going to deploy to buy another book of business, that's going to be something that helps us get from kind of point A to point B where we have a reduced income over the first few years.
I love it. I love it. It's I'm so impressed by the how prepared you were for this. It's really awesome. Hey, breaking in real quick. I really hope you're enjoying this episode and finding my YouTube channel of value. If you're a high performing financial advisor that can use somebody as a guide or a resource to explore all your transition options out there in the marketplace, I'm a non biased, independent transition consultant that can help make this process so much easier for you. And another plus, it costs absolutely nothing to work with me. If you want to have a conversation, please feel free to text, call, email, DM me. My contact information is all over this episode, and I'll let you get back to it. So, to a wholesaler that is, you know, 10 years, 5 years out, knowing that they want to exit the industry, what what mistakes did you make? What were some of your best practices throughout this? Basically, what should they be doing to ensure when the time is right that they're going to have enough opportunities to be able to make a successful exit?
Sure, great question. So first is be real clear about what their family budget is and kind of determine a 2-year window where you need to have close to that amount of money, possibly in the bank. The reason I say that is when you do make the transition, you have a lot of confidence knowing things are at least going to be okay from the expense standpoint for the first couple of years. That can seem daunting, but at our levels of income, it's definitely doable. Second, I'll be very cautious for long-term expense commitments. I think my wife was awesome about every time I turned around and wanted to buy the mountain house or get the new club membership or go to this school, which are all great things. I'm not speaking ill of them at all. They're all great in that timing. But one of those choices could have kept me on the road wholesaling. And
Yeah.
so just kind of a little bit of future casting with your spouse, I think it is a great thing to do. And then another thing, getting your spouse on board. I'm happy to talk about why I landed where I did and why my spouse Courtney had a lot of more peace is showing her I was committed to making the transition. She would talk to me at the end of a long day or a challenging, call with my boss or a not great conference I was at. And so I would complain probably a lot about the role and some of the rigors of it. But the reason she became convicted is I went out and got my CFP while I was still wholesaling. So she saw all the studying that I did, all the time away from the home, and she's like, "Oh man, he's committed." And then the unique place where I landed after the second opportunity didn't come to fruition on buying an advisor's book of business when we were literally at the finish line. I went in my own mind and said, "Okay, who is a client of mine that's close to home, who has a healthy dose of humility, and they're growing, and they're going to be able to help me serve families really darn well." And that happened to be my firm. They have a unique structure where they're also able to help out with some benefits. And so my wife got a sense of peace as well, that although I was going to be starting from scratch with no book of business, I was going to be next to a great team that was doing everything to make sure I succeed, and also helping from the transition from, corporate type benefits to having some type of healthcare benefits in place, which I know sometimes are a sensitive option. And so back to your question, Corey, what I think a wholesaler should do, be true about your budget, get to a savings amount with the end in mind to try and not interrupt the family budget. Be cautious of long-term expense commitments, called the golden handcuffs. Get your spouse on board. Absolutely get your spouse on board because it's a team effort
Mhm.
to make a mid-career change like I did. And then find the right opportunity that feels the best, not necessarily buying the biggest revenue or the biggest book of business or the highest earnout. Just leave a lot of flexibility. And you have no flexibility if you buy a book of business because you're locked into that book, whether the clients like you or not. So I landed at a spot where I'm able to build a book of business versus inheriting or buying or having to build a business, which was great for me. And happy to talk more, the opportunity of what I'm doing now at my current firm and a little bit about it for any other advisors that have an interest.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want to talk about Carnegie. But I just think one other thing to reiterate that you really said to me is just, you know, allowing yourself to feel like it's okay to reach out to financial advisors that you have really good relationships and just ask them the questions. I mean, my father was a financial advisor and he just gave us the best quality of life. He worked hard, but he was home. He was my soccer coach. He was my baseball coach. He never missed any of my stuff. It's an amazing quality of life. And if advisors really, really like you, I mean, they want you to have that same quality of life as well. And it's just totally human to be able, to want that. So just feeling that it's okay to ask that question, that's something that really resonated with me through our conversations.
Yeah, and to add on that, Corey, as well said, I always ended the conversation with, "Hey, Ross, don't you want to flip to the other side of the desk or become an advisor? Like, why are you out there on the road?" And I would kind of chuckle and laugh, and I'd say, "Oh no, I got the best job in the world. I get to run around and share stories, and it's all good. Don't worry." And you're always the best judge on your past self, to critique what you should have done. And probably what I should have done in those conversations is, so you're right. I do have an interest in becoming an advisor and helping families just like you do. Tell me what you would do if you were in my shoes. And then naturally you leave the door open to have that conversation. And if that advisor wants to step in that door and say, "Hey, you want to join our team, or you want to do this, or you want to do that," and then also, I tell career changers, not just wholesalers and advisors. A mentor shared this with me 10 plus years ago, is create your own personal bullseye as a wholesaler of a team that you would want to be a part of. So I really had two requirements on the center of my bullseye, and it was close to home and a team environment. And then that second rung is kind of like I would like to have, but I don't need to have. And so when I was out there talking, I knew exactly whether or not an advisor's team or an advisor's practice hit my bullseye. And actually, in the couple of cases that didn't come to fruition, playing Monday morning quarterback, they didn't hit the dead center of that bullseye like I had actually intended. So just think really hard about the practice you want to be a part of, and then just reverse engineer that exit. And I think the wholesaler role is going to be there for a long period of time. but there is a challenging dynamic, right? There's a lot of time on the road, time away from family. And I've found, being home, I just say yes to more things. I become a bit more a part of my community and call it my local ecosystem versus, being on the road here, being on the road there. Someone has to do it. It's not a bad role at all, but it is something worth exploring if you're thinking about making a shift.
I love it. I love that you finally made the leap and all of this came to fruition. Can you tell us a little bit about the company and the role that you're in right now? I mean, I know personally I've had really good recruiting sense or success just helping this firm grow through, just allowing financial advisors to be independent without being alone, like you said before. So would love to hear more about it.
Sure. So I was fortunate to have Carnegie Private Wealth as a client from a wholesaler perspective for many years. So I got to see the inner workings of the team. And first is that team component. It is truly a team where someone down the hall can help me with a case I'm working on. We have devoted financial planners to help with the planning component. We have devoted folks that actually manage the portfolios. And so just those two items alone allow you to be, out and about talking to folks, helping more families, and really to quarterback that relationship. So that's one thing is help with portfolios, help with planning. I had a huge sense of imposter syndrome, right? Like, oh no, I have a CFP and I'm going to buy this book of business. Do I even really know how to do a financial plan and help folks? So that's what Carnegie provided for me. Huge amount of support on planning and the investment piece. Secondly, they are independent, so tied to LPL. It's a lift out team from Wells Fargo a couple years back. And what they were able to also share with other advisors out there is they want advisors to choose them every single year. Every advisor has a choice to hang a shingle here or to hang a shingle elsewhere. So their goal is to provide the concierge treatment to a producing financial advisor to take things off their plate, to allow them to grow, and then have the flexible environment of being tied to an independent broker dealer like LPL. Our team specifically is a part of Strategic Wealth Services. It's a specific group of about 51 teams across the US, and you get really kind of a direct point of contact for technology, for planning, for marketing, for operations. It's just a quick phone call away. So you get the capacity and also the capability of a very large firm like broker dealer, but you get really more intimate touch from a close team that partners with the Strategic Wealth Services teams across the country. So very appreciative to be a part of that. And then just, a last thing about the folks that lifted out from Wells Fargo and created Carnegie Private Wealth, just a healthy dose. I already mentioned this previously, a healthy dose of humility, right? It's a team environment. We're trying to grow. We're trying to help more families. We're trying to help people. And they have a growing part of their business that is just financial planning, meaning we can work with folks on a project basis. We can work with folks, in a flat fee manner if that's best for them. And the couple of cases I've already come up against is a couple of cases where, yes, there was this couple that had a unique need at that time. They did not have assets to manage or bring over, but we were able to contract with them, call it, over a 12-month retainer to get them from point A to point B. And it's not the traditional assets under management way to work with folks.
Yeah.
So that's what I've enjoyed about Carnegie. Great, hard-working team, a lot of humility. They are rolling out the red carpet to provide that concierge treatment to you as a financial advisor because they want you to grow, and they are absolutely there in your corner to help and have been in my corner on the first few cases I've been able to partner on.
That's awesome, Ross. A top-notch organization got a top-notch guy, and I couldn't be happier for you. I really think this is going to be really, really valuable. I know there's a lot of wholesalers out here that have questions about this stuff, and I think you gave some really good actionable steps to make sure that in the future they're going to end up at the right place. So I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to add that you don't think that we talked about?
Sure. I'd love to say thank you to all of the advisors and OSJs and third parties that helped me along the way, including yourself, Corey. I don't want to name specific names, but you know who you are. In my journey, there were multiple teams or advisors that offered to allow me to link in or become a part of their team or help facilitate those transactions that ultimately didn't take place. And I'm so fortunate that folks were there to help me. So just a really big thank you to the advisor community for helping me out on my journey from getting from one side of the desk to the other. And now I'm just excited to be more of a family guy that gets to turn around and help more families.
I love it, man. Now I get to hang out with you more because you're not flying all over the place. So it's
We
awesome.
I need to see you out in the mountain biking trails or we go like every other Thursday, and you're going to be start getting the calendar invites. Busy time of life, so I actually have to do a calendar invite for mountain biking now. But hope to see you out there on the trails.
I love it. It's collecting dust. I'd love to dust it off. So awesome, Ross. I really appreciate it. I hope you have an awesome weekend
Hey Corey, thank you so much. Have a great day.
as well.